Hello, dear viewers. Thank you for joining us to this series of talks, New Life. And hello, Rav Lightman. Hello, everyone. Hello, Nitza. Hello. And we're sitting here and talking about how we can turn our life into a new life, new meaning good. So we began when we entered the studio today to talk to the Rav Lightman, and he told us that he has some concerns in a slightly different direction than the topics that we discussed recently. We recently discussed the relationship between the partners at home in our relationships in a couple, and today I feel that there's something on your heart. So maybe you can share that with us, and we'll start this conversation. Well, I'm concerned not from the relationship between a couple, although that's very important. The relationship between a couple is good when we have prosperity, when there's time and the place and the conditions for us to bring people for different meetings that we can have with them and to organize groups. And then they can listen about how they can improve their relationships, and they can try it at home and together with us once a week. We can do this with a number of couples who create an environment for each other, and we explain to them about a person's inner psychology and the psychology of the family. And then once they reach this improved relationship or attitude towards each other that's corrected, we can go on and teach them how to be in such corrected and improved relationships at their workplace, with their neighbors, how to pull their children into this circle of the right attitude. And so these circles around a person and his partner, they'll begin to expand more and more, and then our entire society will begin to understand that we can change and improve the relationships between us, and suddenly the level of our life, the quality of life improves, and you can see smiles, and not just each and every person that you see on the street, you see them as miserable or cruel or upset and irritated, and etc., etc. So then this approach starts from the person and expands to further and further to more external circles. So even though this path is not short, it's quite a long path, it's very, very natural. Because a person, he takes care of himself first of all, and his children, his partner, his family, and then as much as he can correct his inner circles, he begins to understand that he's also influenced by more external circles, and he also needs to improve his relationships with them. And then he does have concern for his neighborhood and his city and the region, and perhaps for the entire country and the entire world. But the path is long. Even though it is close to a person and he can understand it, that since I am dependent on the entire world these days, then okay, I'll start with something small that's close to me, and then perhaps we'll reach all the other factors that are they're furthest from me. But you don't start from the thing that is farthest. If something that's near me is the most powerful factor that really concerns me, and it's the most problematic one. So that was the approach that we thought we would take, and that we would reach the correction of the world through the family. But because it is the long path, even though it's a good and nice path, and you improve a person's life and the family life, and everything is very good about it, except for one thing, that you can take this into action when a person truly does have the concern for the situation in his family and in his relationship. But in the conditions that we have now, right now, in this summer of 2012, It sounds a little bit that we're celebrating when really we're standing before a breakdown. Like, let's eat and drink because tomorrow we shall die. This is how I feel because the crisis that I had been speaking about 7 years ago, I spoke about it in Arosa in Switzerland in such a meeting, a special meeting in an international congress, a convention of the Wisdom Council of the world. And there I already spoke of the influence of the environment on a person and the person's influence on the environment and how we can educate and correct, because in this attitude between us we can correct everything and not to have any problem. And if we should continue the way things are, then the problems and the crises are surely on the horizon. So then 7 years ago, it didn't sound like anything more than a philosophy. Some nice words or a nice concern or a nice person. But now we've reached such a state that I can't stay in that same do-gooder approach where I talk to people and say, "Come on, let's do something. We should. It will be good for us." No, now it's about turning out the fires. That now we have to correct the general crisis that's being revealed to us, this global integral crisis. So now we're entering a state where we're not just choosing between states or crises that are situations that are slightly more difficult or slightly less difficult, but we're reaching a state in which there will be no possibility to exist. If we don't have the flour, then you don't have Torah, as is written. And if there's no food, you can't come to a person with anything else, because the first thing and the most principal thing is food. And then the second thing, or the first, it depends, is security. And then you have health. And then after all of that, then you have this concern for the relationships between partners, and yet they're all pushed aside by our ego, which has this order for a very clear order for family, for food, family, and sex, and then only there's money and respect and knowledge. So we should see how we organize our method of correction for the entire world in this way that we take into consideration that a person in this world today is has firstly the concern for food and security. These two things. Making a living means that he can supply himself with this food. So how can we explain to a person? And security means today both the security in terms of the army and also in terms of the state, the country, and also the social systems and the government. It includes electricity and gas and fuel. In short, supplies. Security is supplies, starting with the supply of life, that I'm secure in the life that I live, and also that which allows me to live and fills my life. All of this is called the feeling of security. So how can we explain to a person that he can organize all of these things, all of these systems, only on the condition that he improves his relationships between him and others, his approach to others, so that there's the good approach and attitude between everyone in the understanding and acknowledgement and cooperation between everyone. And then we'll be able to build such systems in the world that will be able to exist in the modern world. We need to explain to a person that the world is now in a sort of internal situation or state in which it's run by this integral law. And it's completely integrated. It's not that we created this connection or integration, but it is integrated in itself, and all these different levels of the inanimate, vegetative, animal, and speaking levels are all interconnected. And we see what is happening in nature, what's happening in human society, what's happening with the economy, what is happening with science and culture and society and in education, with couples, with the outbursts of relationships between people in general. In each place, we can see these breakdowns and crises, both also in you see this in the inanimate level, in the vegetative level, also in the animal level. Something's happening. Nature is becoming aggressive. So we need to find a clear and easy explanation that will be approachable, so that each person will be able to understand that really it all depends on us. It's very hard not to see. He doesn't see it straight away. It's like like I tell him, let's do a workshop for the family, and then within half an hour you can see a nice result. Here he already needs to be knowledgeable. He needs to believe me. He needs to somehow grasp the connection between things that are invisible to the eye. Take a child and tell him, when you press a button here, the light turns on over there. He doesn't know the connection between the button and the lamp. He just knows that when he presses the button, the lamp turns on. He learns this. But does he know it in advance? No. And so we can't show a person that in such a way that if he presses this button now, say he smiles to people during the day and begins to relate to them in this way and connect to them, and then he'll feel the next day that the prices of food in the supermarket goes down by 10%. Something. You can't give him this cause and effect, and this result in this way. So then you don't have an immediate result. It's possible for us to approach people perhaps from a different direction, from the other direction, to tell them, well, you understand that there's no money and that we have nothing to do, right? Yes. Well, you could destroy the government offices, but nothing will happen. There's no gold there. There simply isn't. It's not there. But within us, inside the people, there are many opportunities and possibilities. So let's create this connection between us so that the entire society will be more effective and more productive for each and every one of us. Let's organize these corrections between us at home and organize mutual assistance and help between us in cleaning the streets. Let's organize between ourselves places to store things that we don't need, but maybe others do need. Maybe we can help each other mutually in this way, because we can't afford to buy anything or create what's called in Hebrew gmachim. There are these places where we can, like soup kitchens, where we can cook the most simple things, where each person can come and receive a plate or two of food. Simple. Some porridge, potatoes, doesn't matter, but something for a person so that he can keep himself and stay well. And let's organize something for kids who, for some reason, don't go to a school who's broken down. And so let's give them these extra lessons if they need them together and in this nice mutual way using volunteers. So let's take upon ourselves, us, the people, the citizens of a state or country. Let's take these things upon ourselves, things that we threw it onto the responsibility of the state. And first of all, it's very costly for us. It all comes out of our own pocket. And all in all, we see that we don't have such a great benefit from it. So let us try to build such social systems that will take care of us. And with that, we want to turn to the people. This is something that's a bit more clear to people. We need some organizational experts here. We need a certain ability to convince here. And yet, we can find in each and every region people who are able and are willing to cooperate and participate in this. And so, those who participate are the first to receive support. So we shouldn't have those who only want to receive, but each one should also contribute. We need to also connect the media to this, so that they will talk about the contribution of each and every person, that the more a person invests in money and anything that the surplus that people have at home and their strength and then participation, we want the media to advertise this and to talk about it so that it will be important in society and supported and respected. These are things that we can develop and to organize. It's possible. Here we can also turn to governments, because instead for the government wasting in terms of the country, we're talking about hundreds of millions for all of these services. The person can take these services upon himself. Human society can take this to people. And then, by that, we can save all this money. And with that money, just like the government gives it to the local authorities for cleaning facilities, to take care of different people, for the needy. So if we take this upon ourselves, we can take this money and buy food with it and use it to supply food or soup kitchens to the public. Let's organize it like in the kibbutz. Such restaurants for everyone. General restaurants for everyone. Maybe that will be good. We will feel each other. We will feel the people, our friends. And we don't really care if we eat something very, very simple, because we will fill ourselves up with this warmth, this good attitude towards each other. These are things that we do need to develop, and there will come a time where there will be no other choice. So that if we don't do this, then the states will be even worse and worse until we have the depression and death. Because we are in this plan of nature, and nature must, according to its plan, to change people, to change man from the egoistic man to the altruistic man. So we see this now in our initial or first sort of crash with nature that's called the global crisis. So we can approach this connection and mutual help with examples of what we had in history, because all in all, we are a special people that left Babylon with Abraham, our father, who built this people, this nation. Why do we call him our Father? Is he the father of each and every one? No. Hundreds of thousands left Babylon with him. He was a spiritual father, and that is what we call the father of a nation. What is he special in? He's special in that he taught them how to love, connection, mutuality. It's called the mercy of Abraham. So we need to return to our sources a little bit, and they are there. We just need to awaken these things within us. And so what we learned now from the nations of the world during the ages of the exile, we need to finally learn that this is not our culture. To compete with each other, to have these struggles, to hate each other. Let's return as much as we can to connection, to mutuality, to love, to brothers, a fraternity of brothers sitting together. Because there is no, in the people of Israel, there is no resistance to it. There was always equality in Israel, even if you're the prime minister or if you're some great general in the army. This people is not used to accept these things like is common in the other nations of the world. That has some royalty or no. A person is just like everyone else. Maybe you deserve some respect for your job, but the next day you'll be just like everyone else. We don't have in this people any advantage from birth for one person in comparison to another, and there never has been. Everyone is equal. All Israel are friends, and friends means equal. And it was always like this in this people, and it's rooted in our blood, and therefore it's easy for us to reach this connection, this equality, and it's in the nature of each and every one. And you can feel it in places that when I go abroad, in different places that I go and I see this hierarchy, these differences between the levels, it's something that it's as if that's the way it is. You are the slave and I'm the master. You can still see that it exists. In many places it's felt. And when I was present there and here you don't see it. Here you see people talk to each other in a very direct and simple way. There's no anxiety or special honor. Well, yeah, according to your job or your status, you're respected. But actually, no. Except for that, it's not. There's nothing. So we have this very common approach. We have this internal preparation for the connection of the people. So now we need to understand that still, as much as we are secular and religious, doesn't matter who and what. But we do have a problem because we are in a world that completely hates us. The whole world hates us. And so we need to develop this power of security within us. How? How will we achieve this security? We can see that all our friends in Turkey, once it was Spain, then it was Turkey, and then the United States, and who didn't? Each one only is concerned with what's good for them. They have their own purpose, and then if it's in their interest to sell out on Israel, so that Israel will not even exist the next day, they'll do it without thinking twice. And so with that, we don't have a faithful partner in this world. And we exist we're living between these wolves who all wish to eat us up, and we're simply dependent upon the mercy of the sky, as is written. We have nothing else to depend on but that. And how can we feel secure in such a state where nobody comes and helps us? How can we find this extra power that will help us exist and defend ourselves? We can only point to one power or force, the connection between us that has helped us many times over history, and it will surely, if we are connected, surely it will be much easier for us to reach agreements, decisions, and to be saved or to protect our existence in such precarious times. And it is clear that our enemies, those who hate us, of all the different types, the money from Saudi Arabia and the weapons from the United States, they all want to destroy us. They want to divide us and to bring to protests and outbursts and all kinds of chaos, by which they certainly are ruining the society and country. So let us not illude ourselves, and we mustn't believe to all those nice sayings that they say, but we should see that it's really an evil hand at work here, who want to divide the people, and they want to see here, first of all, protests, and then revolutions that will reach civil wars and even the breakdown of the country. Therefore, this connection between us is a must. Because of these 3 or 4 reasons that we just spoke of. There is another reason, which is not simple to explain to a wide audience when we want to explain, and yet it's not something that we can disregard, which is our balance with nature. Today we can bring many scientists, psychologists, philosophers, sociologists, people who study economics and culture and education. But the most important is the scientists who depend on facts from nature, from their science, from their research. When a person lives in mutual connection to his environment and creates a good influence to all the different levels of nature, to the inanimate, vegetative, and animal, then he's balanced with nature when he creates this good influence. This holistic approach isn't new, and it always existed in the in the margins of science, and now it's advancing and coming more and more to the center of science because we see it in quantum physics and biology and all the different phenomena in society. And scientists are seeing more and more how round the world is. And a person with his relationships on the social level influences all the other levels of nature. Especially he draws to human society responses in accordance to his attitude towards nature. The more he is connected correctly in his human society, the more he draws these good responses from nature towards human society, and the opposite. These things aren't visible to the eye. They don't happen in a way that it happens right now, and then you feel the result right away, which is good and also bad, or for the better or worse. But from these researches, we see and these repeated attempts that it does work this way. It is this way. There are these great forces in society, either the bad forces because of mutual hatred, or the good forces due to mutual connection, which are forces that operate on our entire environment. Also on the inanimate, vegetative, and animal levels, on the physical world. And we need to take these forces to enlist them so that we will be able to explain the necessity of connection. We need to muster them and have them help us explain. And actually, there are an infinite number of examples of how our world is one system that is interconnected on all levels, in such connections that we've only now begun to understand and discover them, because we've begun to understand that we depend on them. And so if the world is so interdependent, just like one organism, then we need to relate to each other as one family, as one body, as one system, in which a person depends on his attitude towards others, in his ability to survive and to heal. And so either he corrects himself and arrives at this corrected approach to others, or he'll disappear, because we see that the earth is not able to stand us in the way that we live now. And all the things that are now being revealed, they are being revealed now in a tiny way, only so to teach us about connection, about balance, about correction. But if, after a number of such attempts, don't listen, and we're not obedient, then nature, instead of giving us these warnings and pushes towards correction, it continues, and then its forces will not be the type that awakens us to correction, but they will become more powerful and they'll finish us off. The blows will be not in order to teach us, but in order to destroy us. We need to find and take researches about this on all these different levels. And again, we need to write about all these things to governments, to people who are able to digest and understand this, and also to the public. to regular people. Why? Because in order for us to manifest these things, to put them into action, we don't need any special tool except for the public opinion, social opinion, the support of the media, the support of the government, the support of the local authorities. But we don't need money. We only need to support it. We only need to have people, encourage people to participate in this. There needs to be a participation here. And it doesn't get in anybody's way. It can only better the people's life, and also the government. It can make it easier to. It can make the economy better. It can make a person's life better. In all ways, it can make the life of a country better. Doesn't matter how detailed our plan will be. If we write a paper of the expenses, we will see that it's really nothing major. You only need to give an order to the media, to the authorities, and people will need to organize maybe some round circles with some tables and chairs at the different local authorities, and maybe you'll need some storage houses, but you have lots of places that are empty, and they will become more and more empty due to the crisis. So really, there is no problem. It's only this general approach, the good general approach, that will organize everything. We have this opportunity here to make this change in the relationships of society and to change a person's life in a state of crisis and also in a state of destruction. And of course, we can go here from the light to the heavy, and to see how these things influence the family life, our personal relationships, our romantic relationships, our education of our children, and more and more. And to take a person and raise him above depression and drug usage, and to raise a general morale of the human society. It's not that these things are not important, but first, of course, we need to take care of food and shelter and security. So all these very concerning things that you talked about, you did give a point of hope here, and I wrote it down and marked it. We need to evolve this force of security between us, and also to develop this force that will help us to defend ourselves, the force of connection between us. And I know, both personally and on a more general level, I know that this security is something that most people have a concern for or concern about. So if we create a plan that we call perhaps building a network of security between us, or something called bringing back the security, or creating something around that, something that could interest people on a personal level, also on a social level, on all different levels. How would we begin to build this plan? Because really, the security is one of a person's greatest needs and lacks. Also, in a state that is not so grave, and of course, the worse it gets, it becomes the most central thing. Security is our feeling of existence, our experience of existence, and truly it is the most important thing. But we think of security that is something that has to do with the army, with the country, with the economy, with health, and more things. But really everything is security. Our entire life is all it is just keeping ourselves safe or taking care of ourselves. But we can't talk about it in this manner. And so we give this word security all these other definitions and names. So that's right. If we systematically take security from the most necessary security to the less necessary security, then we can go through all the different forms of life that we exist in. You're right. Because all in all, our ego wants to A, defend ourselves, not to be hurt, and B, to expand its control as far as it can outside of itself. So then he has his own security so that nobody enters him. And secondly, his security by exiting himself as much as he can to control. And by that he enhances its internal security. And so nobody really in his life is dealing with anything except for security. What do I need lots of money for? Why do I need business and control and more and more? It's the lack of feeling of security. If we could give a person a pill so that he would have whole and complete security and safety and certainty, would he do anything? Well, yeah, maybe he'd play around with things, but he wouldn't destroy himself. Everything is security. We even get married for security. If I would have known that I could get the same pleasure with that same woman whenever I want to, and I have complete security in that, then why would I need to start to build a family? And then the lack of security, it moves us, and that's true. We call it a lack or a desire. Right, so it's one of the most basic things. So from here, because it's so basic and because all people in the world are so busy with it, even those who reach the highest levels of life, they sometimes have the problem of not losing what they've gained. So since it interests so many people, how can we gradually explain how much the connection between us it contributes to our security? Because this lack of security that we have, it comes from this disconnection. Because I stand alone before the world. If something happens to me, I fall backwards and nobody will catch me. That's right, that's right. So how can we build this thing? How do we expand this term, this feeling of security and this to the entire periphery of our life? And how do we explain that only in this network of connection between us we can cover this concern, this lack of security in such a way that we feel ourselves to be completely fulfilled and calm and whole and happy, etc. Again, what we need is to explain. We need advocacy. But we shouldn't call it education, because the word education, people relate it with children and with a very long time that we need in order to create change. We can call it propaganda or advocacy. Security, like you say, is something very internal. And somewhere along the way, humanity has found the ways in order to cover itself in such a way to have so-called security. Right, we're constantly defending ourselves. That's all we do. Even our weapons are about security, but really security is really more internal. If we learn together how we can evoke this force of security, just like you taught us in the previous talks, to evoke this force of love, we see that a person never acquires security if he does so alone, but his security depends only on everyone else, and therefore the world, the more that it advances, you see the discovery of the lack of security. And we advance through the covering of this lack of security from the levels of the inanimate, vegetative, animal, and speaking levels. There are two lines. One line that descends and one line that ascends. The line that descends is the one by which all through history I lose more and more my connection with everyone. I used to live in a tribe, everyone was together, tribes of families, and then a little bit less, the village, then only the family, and now it's just me on my own. And together with that, I've built tools that will help me to defend myself against this lack, where I can cope with my home, with my tools, with my agriculture, using all these things that really I don't need so many people for, until I reach a state in which I have everything. My supermarket, my pension, Social Security, all is supplied for me and I'm on my own. And it used to be the opposite. I had nothing, but I had the environment that supplied me with everything. It's like an interaction. We've changed these two things around. And now we've arrived at the acknowledgement of evil. I see that I'm completely dependent. Especially now, I'm dependent completely on all the different systems that we created. Also the state, by the way, not just the person. There is no country in the world today that can exist on its own. It's all about dependency on other countries, export and import, and also the person. He doesn't have his own yard with his own tomatoes. He doesn't have anything. He also doesn't know how to do any of these things. Give him flour, he doesn't know how to make bread out of it. It's that bad. We don't know anything on its own, that we're all dependent. Yes, so we've reached a state that even the private person in society, he doesn't know anything. He doesn't. If he wants to wash his clothes, he has a machine. If he wants to cook, he has an oven or a microwave. And if he wants to prepare something, then he buys it from the supermarket where it's already half made. Everything is already prepared. It's not that he has a cow that he milks for and then makes the cheese or has some vegetables near his house. Nothing. We live and exist in such a way that we're so dependent on society and our environment that we don't even understand this. In the last few dozens of years, we've completely lost the sense of how if we didn't have electricity and oil and supplies and gas, everything would die. I'll go to the fields and what will I do? I'll eat grass like a cow? And the whole world is this way. I'm not built for this. I have nothing. So we need to understand that this evolution we went through has brought us to the necessity of the good connection between us. Because if today we have such a breaking down of the systems, and if our relationships, our connections are dependent on money, then we collapse. Because we can't find between us the approach of mutual support unless it's with money, with a give and take of money. And in this way, we're in a very dangerous state, in a very, very great insecurity, because you have no money. If I have no money, I'll die, and if I have money, I'll live. And really, tomorrow, our money will have no power, and it won't even matter how much money you have. And then what will you do? Your money will be worth nothing. And then in the very near future, we will need to see that unless we organize between us good relationships, we won't survive. Each person will feel himself inside his ego. Each one will be willing to eat the other, to defend his own territory. I'll close my apartment, my windows, close everything off, and store some food and sit there as if I'm in some sort of castle. And that's it. That's the life. If I go out to the street, somebody might kill me or eat me. I don't know what. But if we understand that in a world that loses the value of its money, where we can't work and make a living and trade this money for food and all kinds of necessary supplies that are necessary for our existence, then the only thing that will help me is the good and loving relationships and attitude from others. It's like a baby in a family. That's the way it is. And we are more dependent on others than the small children are dependent on their family. We need to understand this, that it will be clear and scary how scary it could be that we'll have no help unless we awaken and evoke this good mutual relationship and attitude between us. Therefore, security is a topic that's global, that's very general and principle. And we can, instead of talking about security, we can talk about lack, but it's the same. You reminded me now in your description a very famous show on TV that's called הישרדות. Survival, where only one person survived at the end of the show. So how can we organize the survival of the new world? Well, I don't think that if you take a person, people, and put them on some island, I don't think the person can survive if he kills all the others. It's not natural. If we're competing, where a person needs to be above all the rest, that's something else. But that's only on the condition that we are living in a society that is able to supply everything. In a society that is unable to supply anything, then our survival depends on our connection. An environment or a society that supplies everything, like in America, then your survival depends on how much you can run people down and run or step on them on the way up, because really our survival depends on what society can supply us. And here on such a lone island, the security and survival depends on the connection. So this is the question of how can we organize everything in the conditions that everything is collapsing, that the money doesn't help. Even if you have gold at home, you can eat it. But really, who needs it? Nothing. A person will suddenly feel that he has nothing. Okay, so you prepared for yourself a small storage of food. Then people will come over and kill you in order to steal it. If we're talking about the larger scales of the state, the country, then we have no choice. We have to understand that only from the mutual supply that comes from mutual consideration, from the heart, from the understanding that in the connection between us, that this connection between us, it is the thing that supplies us with this security. That's the only thing that we can really advance through in this new age. There is no hope for the human species in a global integral world that is round, in which we're so interdependent and interconnected, like with the butterfly effect. Unless we have this sensation, this feeling of the mutual relationships of warmth and security, and for that to be the state of our connection, we need to feel that we belong to one family. And this is where nature is bringing us, is leading us. Is there anything else, Oren? If possible, in the few minutes that we have left to the end of this talk, could you illustrate for us emotionally what will the individual feel if the society around him behaves in this way that you describe? What will a person feel in such a social environment? You will have new sensations because we have evolved over our evolution. Only in our self, the sensation of our self, that me, the individual, experiences the world and feels others through myself. I feel them through myself. And sometimes I don't even feel them. Sometimes it's as though they don't exist. And if they exist, I feel and experience them only to the extent that they either help me or disturbs me. I see things through my ego. I don't see the world as it is. From this entire world that's here around us, here around me, there's lots of things. I don't even know what. Maybe there are more bodies here and aliens and images and spirits and I don't know what. I see from all of this only what can either harm me or benefit me. That is how my ego works. It sifts for me everything. And according to the extent of its development, I see the world. Just like science shows us that the more we advance and develop, we see phenomena that are new, that we didn't see before. They existed before, we just didn't discover them, and now we do. So, if I begin to bond with others and they with me in this mutual way, I begin to feel what they feel. I begin to think as they think. I suddenly become Adam, a man, a person that includes everything, that's integral, includes all the people in the world. I lose myself that exists on its own and begin to absorb everybody else as parts of me, just like a mother that includes her children. And then I attain this integral perception, a general whole perception of nature, of the entire nature. And then I begin to feel not only humanity, but the entirety of nature in such a way that my sense of vision is opened up, my hearing sense is opened up, all the other senses, and I begin to see the world through all the other people. It's as though I dress myself in them and clothe myself, and I begin to see the world just like they see it. And so I exist above my ego and I'm already inside them. And then my approach is such that I see a world that exists outside of me. The true reality that is outside me and is not, I don't have this barrier of the ego between us. And that brings me to the higher perception of reality. It is not filtered by my ego. And I see this life that is out of my body. And it to such an extent that I stop feeling this body that gives me life. And I feel myself as outside of it. I don't mind if it dies because I will continue to live. Why? Because in my consciousness, in my sensation, it's as though I'm outside of me and others. Just like that. We begin to feel that the person within me, it exists above the animal side, the animal level of that I have, and yes, it has a limited amount of time to live, but my inner person does not. So, if you could summarize in 1 minute, this crisis is for our own good. So thank you, Rav Lightman. Thank you, Nitza. Thank you, our viewers. Come, we will continue in our next talks. Until then, all the best and goodbye.